So for all of you guys that just tuned in, Haley is such a sport. About 4 minutes ago, Jose, myself, and Haley were talking. I was like, Haley, why don't you go live first and introduce us to everybody? And she looked like a deer in the headlights, but she did an absolutely fantastic job welcoming everybody. I see it popping up here on my Facebook page on my iPad. We got Hillary, we got Scott Chesney, the one and only Scott Chesney. We got Christine Albanese, who knows all about overcoming adversity in the darkest of times for sure. Let's see who else we got. We got Marianne, we got Ruth, we got Hannah. Man, it's approaching, wow, it's well over 100 people by now. That is awesome. And that's just on Facebook. So I'm pumped up, I'm jacked up, out of my skull as usual. And I tell you, like, as excited as I am right now, I think in about a half an hour time, you guys are going to see me stand up, open up the door to my closet. Everyone knows by now I'm trapped in my closet. You can see, open up the door to my closet, run outside, and I got to get rid of this energy because Jose, every time I talk to him, I leave just pumped up, jacked up, and more important than anything, inspired and filled with faith and hope. So folks, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to my fantastic, great friend for many years now, the inventor of the Battle Rope ST, cancer survivor, and I like to call him the human encyclopedia of self-help and fitness. I'm serious. This guy is one smart dude. He's read a lot and he remembers all this stuff. He's a human encyclopedia, ladies and gentlemen. Jose and me, we're going to entertain you guys and we're going to pump you guys up too. How's it going, Jose?
What's up? Great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. Quite the introduction, but I appreciate that. And I hope we can help some people today.
There's no doubt. I think it stretches far beyond hope, and that every time, it's the truth. Every time that we get done talking, I'm like, wow, I'm excited. I'm pumped up, even when things are seemingly falling apart around us. So, I know last week when we were talking, oh, that wasn't last week, a couple of days ago when we were talking, we were talking about mindset. We were talking about, you had a great Harvard, was it Harvard study?
Yeah, Harvard and Binghamton. It was research out of Harvard and Binghamton, University, about the power of positive thinking versus negative talk. And I mean, if you want to just get right into that, like you want to just get right into that?
I think we should get into that, and then we'll jump back and talk about who Jose is.
Yeah.
Just give him some juice right away so people know, man, this is
so I think it's really relevant for this time that we're in right now. So the way I like to look at, you say I'm a human encyclopedia. It's just, to me, it's just I see myself more as a reporter, just reporting information that I've just learned from other people. It's not information that I made up. I love to listen to great leaders who are experts in the field of performance enhancement. And one of the recent speakers I was listening to recently, his name is Trevor Moab, and he's a performance enhancement specialist. He's worked with Fortune 500 companies. He worked with college Division I athletes, professional athletes, and military. And it was a great talk. And basically what the talk was about was, because we hear this all the time, like the power of positive thinking, right? It's like almost like a cliche. It's like, who hasn't heard that, right? And it's like, but the interesting thing is that a lot of the research shows that it's not so much about positive thinking. In fact, positive thinking, like when you tell people, the research shows that when you tell people to be positive, that it actually repulses a lot of people. And actually, because the reason is like you're telling me to be positive, but I'm going through a divorce, right? You're telling me to be positive, but I can't stand my job. You're telling me to be positive, but my child is addicted to opiates or whatever. Or you tell me to be positive, but look at the state of our economy and our world. We have this pandemic going on right now, and And so what they've learned is that it's not so much about positive thinking, but it's more about what you verbalize, the power of speaking, right? And then the power of negative talk, like how powerful that is. So when you verbalize something, this is the research out of Harvard University and Binghamton. They come to the data has showed that when you verbalize something, it's 10 times more likely that it's going to manifest in your life. But now that when you say, and this is I'll say this too, because maybe there are some, because I'll speak to, like, people who are religious and people who maybe are not religious. If you're a religious person, the Bible says that God spoke things into existence, right? So there's power in what we say, what we speak. In the beginning, there was the Word, and then the Word became flesh. For people who know the Bible, that's the Bible, right? But that's also, that's also in a lot of faiths, actually, the power of speaking, right? So it's really important to understand that. So the research shows that when you say something negative, you actually 4 to 7x that. So it's about, so when you say something, when you speak it, it's 10 times more likely to happen. When you say something negative, it's actually 40 to 70 times more likely to happen. So it's not so much about having negative thoughts inside, internalizing them. And this is what they did. The research, what they did was when Trevor worked with college athletes, they had a certain amount of time to teach them how to become better performers. And they only had like 22 hours a week. The NCAA gets to work with college athletes. So when he worked with top coaches, they were always interested in how do we make great players better, or how do you make great players greater in the time that we have. And so they couldn't go through the whole process of thinking, like, of teaching how to change your internal dialogue. Is meditation important? Yes. Is affirmations important? Yes. But that was like, the way he described it was like, that was like AP chemistry. They were trying to teach AP chemistry when they really just needed to teach 8th grade, basic chemistry. Like, it's basic. What's a simple way that we can help change behavior without having to go through all this internal transformation? So what the research showed was, if we could just get our players to stop saying negative shit out loud, like stupid shit out loud, that the research showed that it could create a greater impact in their lives. And so what they taught college athletes was not all this, how to change from the inside, but just don't say stupid shit out loud, like, and the power of that. And don't complain, oh, it's hot out here. Don't complain, oh, I can't stand the coach. And it made a huge difference. And so he went on to tell a bunch of other incredible stories about the power of negative talk. And I'll tell you a couple stories. Is there any, do you want to ask a question or anything before I keep going? Or?
No, I think I know some of the I've heard, I think some of the stories that you're referring to, and I think that that's absolutely fantastic way to continue, because just don't say stupid shit. When you said that to me at first, I didn't know, but understand completely. But then you told these stories, and I'm like, wow, this makes total sense. I'm excited for the audience to hear this.
Yeah, I mean, it's really was really interesting listening to this, because one of the things I think we all struggle with is like having negative thoughts, right? And so we think like, oh man, if I have negative thoughts, like it's not good, it's not, and you're kind of like in this kind of having this internal battle all the time, and it's really not so much about that. It's really more about understanding that when you verbalize something, that you're gonna either increase the manifestation of what you want in your life or what you don't want in your life. So some really cool examples that he shared with, based on the research, was a very famous baseball player. Many people or your audience may or may not know, is Bill Buckner. He was an 8-time Golden Gloves champion from the Boston Red Sox, and he's famous for the error that he made in the 1986 World Series against the Mets, where he let the game-winning ball go between his legs at first base, which resulted in the Mets winning the World Series. Well, the interesting thing is that there was an interview that resurfaced sometime, it was about 10 years after the World Series. And the interview was done 12 days before the World Series with Bill Buckner, where he said, you know, the dream is to win the World Series, but the nightmare is that I lose the World Series because the game-winning, ground ball goes between my legs and the other team wins. And that's basically exactly what happened. So just some other examples too was a famous basketball player called Pistol Pete Maravich, and he was quoted in an interview saying, he was 26 years old at the time, and he said, well, I hope that I don't just wind up playing 10 years of basketball and then at the age of 40 die of a heart attack. Well, he played 10 years of basketball, and then at the age of 40 in Pasadena, California, he dies of a heart attack. So these are just like just some evidence and stories. There's lots of them that really. Another great one was about a guy. This was from a magazine article in Success Unlimited. There was a guy who was hired to fix a refrigerator box cart on a train, and he went into the box cart, and he panicked and accidentally locked himself inside of the box cart. And he was pounding on the doors trying to get out, and he couldn't get out. And so he had a pen with him, and he began to just write on the walls inside of the box cart what he was feeling. I'm getting colder. I feel like I'm getting weaker. I'm losing my strength. I can barely write right now. I think these are the last words that I'm ever going to be able to speak. And he wound up dying. And the next day, some maintenance crews found him in the box cart. But here's the incredible part of the story is that the refrigeration mechanism in the box cart was broken, and the temperature inside the box cart was 56 degrees. And there was plenty of oxygen inside of the box cart as well. So there's no reason, physical reason why he should have died, other than the fact that they believe that the power of speaking it out into existence. So those are just like some incredible examples. And I think it's really relevant to like the times that we're in right now, like because we're being inundated right now, like through the media. We've always been, but even to to perhaps the greatest level right now, with just fear, and is it real? And is it a real concern? Are there real issues? Yes, but that's not what's important. What's important is that we don't speak the things that we don't want to see in our lives. So it's not about, so what are you saying, Jose, that we're supposed to just act like it's not there or lie? No, I'm just saying, if you look at the data, right? The data says that when you speak stuff out loud, that you are 40 to 70% more likely to manifest that in your life. So, I mean, I think that there's that's a really important.
And would you say, so the opposite side of this, right? So we're talking about don't say stupid shit, right?
Out loud.
Yeah, out loud. But right. And when I know that what I only know from my personal experience and looking, for some feedback on this and talk a little bit about it, maybe help some other people. But, like you said, we all have the negative and we have the positive voice inside. But I find that, when I hear that negative voice, I try to start to pay a little bit more attention, like kind of like shrink that voice down and then start to pay attention to the voice that says, yes, I can. What positive can I bring out of this situation? What do I have control over? And when I start paying attention to the positive, that grows and the negative kind of shrinks. So I believe it to be true that you could manifest positivity into your life and the lives of the people around you as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like, if you understand, I do a lot of like also listening to teachings on neuroscience, and if you understand, there's two there's two parts of your brain that are very important to understand in regards to what we're talking about right now. What we focus on, expands in our lives. So just two things to talk about. So the part of our brain that's responsible for fear and finding out what's dangerous, it's called the amygdala, right? And it's like they call it, it's about like the primitive part of our brain, but that's the part of your brain that responds to like fear. For example, someone jumps out in front of you or cuts you off, and there's a quick burst of adrenaline, and you react, and that's good. But what happens is, if we are constantly in a state of fear, if we're constantly feeding ourselves information or filling our minds with thoughts of fear, then your brain, you become amygdala dominant. It's almost like you've strengthened that part. It's like your body. If you just did a curl, on one side of your, with one arm, and you just kept doing a curl, that part of your body is going to get really strong. Well, it's the same thing with the amygdala. And fear, if you're constantly feeding yourself thoughts that are going to create fear and anxiety, and inside of your body, that part of your brain is going to become so. First of all, we are more biased, amygdala biased. We're designed, our brains are more designed to find out what's dangerous in our environment, and it's a protective mechanism. The problem is that if we're constantly in that state, we're constantly feeding ourselves information that's going to activate the amygdala, then you become amygdala dominant. So then, well, here's the other thing. Here's the other part of your brain that gets activated. It's called the reticular activating system. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, but that's the part of your brain that actually creates consistency between your thoughts, your inner world, and your outer world. And it will search your environment and try to find things that are consistent with your dominant thoughts. And now it could work both ways. It could be like we've all probably experienced this if we were ever thinking about buying a car, right? A certain color car, or we wanted something in our lives. Driving down the road, all of a sudden you see there's a Honda, a red Honda. There's another red Honda. There's another red Honda, right? So the reticular activating system is going to keep finding what your dominant thoughts. It's going to create consistency between your dominant thoughts and your reality. So if we are constantly in states of fear and feeding our minds fear, and we're only thinking about fear and what we don't want, what are we doing? We're activating our amygdala. Our reticular activating system is going to go out, and it's going to scan the environment and try to create consistency with that. So it can work both ways. So that's why it's so important. It is important to what you were saying before. Can positive thoughts? It's really comes down to this: what we focus on expands, and our brains and our minds are going to create that consistency. So, and then it goes even deeper. I mean, what happens is you literally, for every thought that you have, there's a biochemical reaction where peptides are released, and your body, like, it's almost like an addiction. It really is, where your body will expect. You could wake up one day and nothing could be wrong, but you're feeling anxious anyway, because your body's so used to you thinking negative thoughts that it becomes anxious, and it will make you think a negative thought. And then you go, oh, that's why. Yeah, that's right. I'm still pissed off at my boss, or I'm still pissed off at my wife or my husband or whatever. And so it's so important to understand that what we focus on expands. And whatever your dominant thoughts are, whatever you're feeding yourself consistently is going to feed your dominant thoughts. Then your reticular activating system is going to find that in your reality. So I don't know. Does that answer the
answers the question, but even more so, it triggers another question. And we're going to get to who Jose is in a minute, and why you could validate that you put this to practice in your own life, all these different strategies and techniques. But right now, I think it's so important because I'm sitting here in my house. I've got 3 kids, right, ranging from 11 to 20. And, they're watching me very carefully, right? And if they notice that I'm in a state of angst, if they notice that anxiety, I think, puts people into fear, puts people into an anxious or anxiety state.
Same
and then
thing.
anxiety
Yeah.
freezes you into inaction, and then it's like, woe's me, what am I going to do? And if that's what their brain is registering as the way to act when you're challenged, when you're under pressure, then we are unfortunately instilling in our children, a habit, a mind-body connection that's going to last with them for an extended period of time, perhaps their entire life, until they consciously, and if they ever consciously are able to say, whoa, this isn't serving me, and they're able to break it. But we now have an opportunity to display the opposite, to act calm, to act cool, to act collected, to instill faith, to instill hope instead of fear and doubt, right? To show them that in the face of the pandemic and all the horrific things that, if we're watching the news and blah, 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 we're still waking up. We're going about a routine. We're working towards making the world a better place. We're being kind to other people, all these things.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're talking about a couple of things. You're talking about the power of conditioning through modeling, whatever we saw growing up, and whatever your children are seeing growing up, that's being modeled to them, they're going to repeat that. That's going to become part of their conditioning. But here's so how do you overcome that? Like, so here's a cool thing too. Like, another interesting thing that, like, research and data around neuroscience is that what we're talking about too is become the power of becoming aware, right? The more we can become aware, the more that we can change these patterns, self-awareness, consciousness, however way you want to call it. In neuroscience, it's called metacognition. We're the only creatures on Earth that have the ability to observe our thoughts. That's called metacognition. Okay. Now, so what's the relevance of that? The relevance of that is when we begin to practice observing our thoughts, right? Then and realizing, okay, and observing patterns that are either, and why do we want to observe our thoughts? Because we want to be able to observe patterns that are either supporting us to become a greater version of ourselves or not supporting us. Patterns that are either conditioned patterns that we've learned from childhood that are keeping us in states of anxiety and fear or not. So through the power of metacognition, we're able to observe our thoughts. So now here's what happens when we can truly start to practice this and recognize that's a pattern that I have. I'm seeing myself in following this pattern. Now, what happens is you now have stepped outside of that pattern once you begin to observe it, and you're no longer in the pattern. But now where you are is you're now in a place of decision. You're in a place of decision. And the decision is I can either go back into that pattern that's not supporting me, or I can create a new one. And the way that we create a new one is by shifting our focus. A lot of times, the simplest way to shift our focus is to gratitude. I think gratitude is the quickest and easiest way to shift our focus. What do I mean by that? Find what's good in your life. Look, like the world, the universe we live in is everything that we experience is by contrast. There's polar opposites. We live in a universe of polarities. For every negative or fearful thought or disappointing thing that happens in our lives, there's something good that happens in our lives and in the world. And by the way, there's lots of really good things happening in the world still, but the media doesn't really endorse that, So the power of metacognition, practicing that, learning to observe your patterns, right? And bringing yourself into that place of decision making, right? And deciding, okay, do I want to continue to follow that thought pattern that's keeping me in that loop of fear that's, activating those parts of my brain that are making me find the consistency and then creating the biochemical reactions in my body that are literally causing my body to be addicted to those thoughts? Or do I want to make a decision and start to shift my focus onto what's great, what's good, what's possible? All the things that are hopeful. If you go back to, not to get too spiritual, whatever, but that's, there's the Bible scriptures on that too. So anyway, I always like to try to tie the two in because, for me, that's I think for me that works. But the science backs it up too, which is interesting too. So yeah. But yeah, so yeah,
I think
Power of
it's so
focus, man.
powerful because you know what you're basically saying, and I've experienced this in my life, and I'm sure that many people have experienced glimpses of what you're saying, right? And it's a matter of holding onto it, being conscious that this is the state of all humans, right? And that we have the ability to step out, be self-aware, step out of the situation, say, okay, this pattern isn't supporting the person that I want to be and
Correct.
become, the person that I want to even be, 8 weeks from now when this whole pandemic thing passes and we're done, right?
Yeah, or today.
Yeah,
Today, I don't want to
today,
be in
right?
fear and stress and
That's how
anxiety.
fast it happens. It's a decision. Step out, recognize the pattern, and then make a decision, interrupt that pattern, and start to put a new pattern in place that's supportive of who you want to be in the moment.
Yes. Yeah, and it's a combination. It's a combination of, focus, like what are you going to fill your mind with, and then also behavior too. I'll tell you, this is cool. This is a cool story too. As far as behavior goes, so there was a lecture that Trevor talked about. He was a speaker, and this has to do with how the power of behavior is really important too. Like you gotta just start behaving like the person that you want to become, right? So there was this very famous, very successful entrepreneur magazine owner. He started a magazine, very successful magazine. He was an entrepreneur. But here's the interesting thing about his story. He was doing a lecture at a Toastmasters, one of these, like speakers to become a speaker seminars. And he told his story, and he said that when he was in high school, he said that he was like, he grew up with a single mom in the Midwest. They were struggling. They were kind of poor, and he was bombing out of high school, hated school. Like he just never really applied himself. But he promised his mom that he would take the SATs, and so he did. He took the SATs, and he thought, didn't think much of it, and he just was trying to fulfill his promise to his mother. And it turned out when he got the SAT scores, he scored a 1480, and so he was like, "Wow!" And his mom was like, "Wow!" She was like, so she asked him, she was like, "Did you?" First thing she asked him was like, "Did you cheat?" And he was like, "No, I swear I didn't." He goes, "I tried, but I couldn't because of the way that the test was set up with the bubbles, and I couldn't see the numbers were all different on everyone's. The questions were all different on everyone's test." And he said, "Wow." So she was like, she was surprised, and he was surprised too. And he thought, well, maybe I'm smarter than I thought I was. Maybe I should start going to class. Maybe I should start applying myself. So he did. He started going to class, and he was like, and then the teachers were like, they started seeing that he was like really applying himself. And they were like, maybe we missed the boat on this guy. And they started giving him more attention. They started helping him out more. He stopped hanging out with people that he used to hang out when he used to skip class. He wound up going to college at a local community college, then to an Ivy League school. And then he went on to create this very successful magazine. And here's the really interesting thing about the story. The moral of the story: about 12 years later, after he took the test, the SAT board periodically does reviews of test results and scores and procedures. And what they realized was, in the school that he took the test, 7 people were sent the wrong results of their SAT scores, and they sent him his actual SAT score. He only scored a 780. And so the amazing thing was, so the moral of his whole story was, he said, people asked me, what your life must have changed when you got the 1480. He said, no, my life changed when I started acting like a 1480, when I started behaving like a 1480.
Wow.
So it's a combination, Bryan, of, changing our focus, feeding ourselves, conditioning ourselves with the right amount of information. This is an interesting fact too. They say if you watch 3 minutes of news, you have a 27% chance of having a shitty day. Especially, so it's that combination of what are you reading, what are you watching, what are you listening to, and then how are you behaving? You want to be a fit person, then go for a walk. Are you behaving like a fit person, or whatever? Are you want to have a healthy relationship, you want to have a loving relationship. Are you being loving, right? So you want to be a successful entrepreneur. What are you doing to be a successful entrepreneur? How are you behaving? So yeah, and your thoughts. Is that cool?
It's very cool. It's also, I think it also extends to, our kids that, we have to protect our own minds and the information we put into our own minds. But if in the background, if they're doing their homework these days or their schoolwork, they're being homeschooled, in the background is this news program playing, even though they're focusing on their homework, this
Oh yeah.
track is being recorded, and it's very scary. I know my son, the other day, I was so proud. He my wife was having a moment. Everybody has bad moments, right? And he says, Mom, there's probably a million things on earth that could kill you, right? Let's start being realistic. You could walk outside, get hit by a car, you could eat something that you didn't know you were allergic to. There's probably a million things that could kill you. She goes, yeah, probably a million things. Now there's a million and one, and that's it. We got to go forward
Yeah.
and focused on the things. And I said, wow, this has come from a 20-year-old kid, but it immediately interrupted her pattern and helped her to think on the positive things. Okay, this already existed. It was already there. It just
Yeah.
wasn't at the forefront. Let's push that back to already there. Now let's focus on the positive things that we do have control over. And I think we had a much better day that day because of that advice.
One of the things Trevor talks about too is that one of the really bad habits that most humans, including myself, we have a tendency to, what we do is we observe and then we report, right? I'm having a bad day. I'm having a bad quarter. My marriage is not going good. I'm having a bad day. I had a bad day at work, right? But so that's where, and this is where we bring the awareness back to it, is what the data is showing, that if we can just, even if we feel like we've had a bad day, we don't have to report it, and break that habit of observe, report, because you're saying stupid shit out loud that you don't really want in your life.
Yeah.
And then you wonder why it keeps showing up.
Yes.
So yeah, so it, again, hopefully what people are going to get out of this, that it's not so much about, look, we all have screwed up thoughts going on inside of us. I think, you could look at the most successful, we all have fear, and it's not really so much about not having fear, but it's not about verbalizing it, right? And then acting in a way that, despite of fear, still taking action. That's called courage. And courage is like a muscle. It can get strengthened. So it's never ever about not having fear. It's about more about not verbalizing it and just having courage to act anyway, and the way that you want your life to be, and taking action, right? Bryan, when you started any of your businesses, I'm sure, right? I mean, people look at entrepreneurs and they go, oh man, you guys must be just fearless. Yeah, right. Right? I mean, I don't know about you, but what do you experience fear?
Plenty, right? So
Right.
even in starting the Max Challenge, right before, I made a decision. There was a certain day I made a decision, going to start this business, but leading up to the actual launch of the first, center, oh my God, every day before, for a good month before, it was like, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? Why would I start another business? I got a business over here. I'm busy enough, and blah, blah. And, I had to really start to recognize that pattern. It was a moment that I started to recognize that pattern. A friend actually helped me. He says, there's nobody positioned better to help people transform their lives. And you got to start. So he's like, it's going to serve you to pay attention to the fact. And then he said these words, he goes, these people need you. And I just planted that in my mind at that point.
Shift the focus.
I shifted the focus and I kept going forward. These people need you. These people need you. Every time I'd start hearing, what are you doing? That negative, I'd say, these people need you. These people.
Right.
And man, then it was like, it started to build and build and build. So I think any entrepreneur, or really any person on earth, that says that they don't have fear, that they don't have self-doubt, is basically like what Jose is saying, like this. No, that's bullshit. It is. They're full of shit. So if you've got fear, if you've got self-doubt, I see a lot of our franchisees joining in on this. Yeah, this is fear. It's a fearful time to some degree, but it's just important. Let's pay attention to the hope side of, let's not let the deepest part of our brains take over. let's, make sure that we focus on the hopeful side
Right.
of what is in front of us.
Yeah, I'll tell you another story too, Brian. That I told you about it in the conversation we had the other day. Back in 2008, when there was when the economy crashed, there was a contractor out in Arizona who built homes, and his work, his job, his whole industry just totally, completely collapsed. And he basically was in a position of, okay, what am I going to do now? How, he was fearful initially, and he was thinking, possibly could lose everything, could lose his home. But then he shifted his focus and he started asking himself different questions. That's a big one too. What are the questions that you're asking yourselves? Because that's going to create the story in your life. So he started asking himself, how can I serve? How can I use the skills, the talents, the gifts that I have to serve my community? And so where he was living, there was a lot of people that lived. They were very they were farmers. There were people who were real artsy, and so he decided to build these small portable greenhouses that were like 12 by 12 or 10 by 10, and they came apart. They were easily to install. He made one for a friend, and his friend loved it. He was so grateful. His friend like asked him if he can build him another one, and then word of mouth got around that he was building these amazing greenhouses that was helping people grow their own foods at a time when everyone was struggling. And in his community, people were really into organic and growing things off the land. And so he wound up thriving and creating a whole new business opportunity based on the crisis that he was in, because he asked himself, how can I serve? And I think that's a question that we can all ask ourselves right now in this time. And if we can get our focus on, and that's another thing too, like a lot of the anxiety and fear that we have a lot of times is because we're so focused on ourselves, like, oh, I'm going to fail. Oh, I'm going to screw up. Oh, I'm going to lose everything. Right. But if we could shift our focus to how can I serve? How can I be of value? How can I provide what my community needs? And then take action in doing so. It's amazing how your life can transform.
Can you just give some flavor to this? Because I know a lot of people, they look at this and say, well, easy for you to say, right? You've
Yeah.
never been through this, or you've never been through that, or I had this shitty time. And,
Yeah.
I just know that that's not true. I mean, people don't know. Most people who are successful, financially successful, spiritually successful as humans on earth for their contribution, it wasn't a straight up, it
Yeah.
was like a rocky road. Sometimes it doesn't even go, they say it goes like this. Sometimes it goes like this, then it goes
Yeah.
boom and crashes down, and
Yeah.
then you got to rebuild from nothing. So
Yeah.
could you add some flavor that, okay, you're a person who's experienced all sorts of craziness in your life, yet you're here and you're talking to
Yeah.
everybody and you're adding value and doing
Yeah.
amazing things in the world. Could you give some background so that they could?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the whole time going through when I was working on bringing Battle Rope ST to the market, I was dealing with my daughter at the time. I think she was in her early 20s, who was struggling with opiate addiction since high school. By the time I was like into Battle Rope ST and getting into the prototype stages, and really, actually, I just signed licensing agreements, and I would get phone calls. There was several occasions where I'd be on my way to go be doing a class for Battle Rope ST in the studio, and I'd get a call from my daughter or someone saying, yeah, she's relapsed, and I'm on my way back to a rehab. So imagine how that feels, right? You got to go do a class, and then I think people can relate to this, like in different ways. Like there's probably trainers in your gym or owners in your gym that have had to, they were on their way to open up the gym, and they got this incredible news that's incredibly painful. And so yeah, I mean, that was something I was going through, like just about the entire time I was bringing Battle Rope ST to the market, was dealing with a daughter who was addicted to opiates and then later to heroin, in and out of rehabs. So that was probably one of the most difficult things that I've had to deal with. I mean, I've had cancer twice in my life, and I kind of feel like almost, I think that would probably a lot of parents would relate to. That's more painful when your child is going through something difficult. Some people maybe have children out there that are going through different types of sickness, and it's extremely difficult. But I think and I mean, it goes back to this whole conversation of and focus, and focusing on what's good. When I find out my daughter was going into a rehab, I could very easily have just wanted to call out or whatever, but I try to shift my focus onto like, okay, she's going to somewhere where she, is going to be helped, and try to find the good in the situation, shifting my focus to trying to find what's good in the situation. I tell you something. When I went through my cancer my first time, when I was 16 years old, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was in high school, lost my hair. There was this girlfriend I was kind of talking to, lost her too, and it sucked. It was shitty, right? And so, but here's something that really, this is one of the reasons I think I became so passionate about the power of thought, right? And the power of the human mind and the physical body. When I went to my first chemotherapy when I was 16 years old, I remember going to the room. It was a room filled with people. Like there was an old priest I remember that was in there. There was women, there was young kids, and it was just a really sad place to be. And you all get hooked up to an IV. I don't know if you ever seen like chemotherapy. I mean, how it's done. I mean, I'm sure it's different now, but at least when I went through it, it was like you went into this room and everybody was like all sick, and it was real depressing. And then they tell you, then this was the thing. Then they tell you after your first treatment all the things to be worried about, right? You're probably going to get sick. You're going to get nauseous. You got to be worried about it, getting sores, and you're going to lose this and that's going to happen, and all this fear. And you're just like overwhelmed with fear. And I remember them telling me on the way home, they told my father, make sure you get him some, this is funny though, ginger ale at the time to like settle his stomach, right? This is how old this type of like teaching was, or whatever, advice. And so we did, right? So on the way home, so and I got all this fear in my head now, right? And so I go home and drink the ginger ale, whatever. And then I go into my bedroom and I lie there. And I just remember thinking like I'm waiting to get sick. I was because they had convinced me I was going to get nauseous, like throw up. It was my first chemotherapy, right? So sure enough, I did. I ran to the bathroom. I started throwing up, and I remember my father came and he was rubbing my back, trying to, console me. And but this is may sound weird to people, and I don't know. I mean, for me, I believe, I believe God spoke to me. I didn't hear an audible voice, but I heard there was a thought in my head that said, "You don't have to get sick no more if you don't want to." And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. And this is my reality, and people could take this however, you can take it or leave it, whatever. But for whatever reason, right? So I had this thought, like, you don't have to get sick no more if you don't want to. I don't know where it came from, but I said, okay, I'm not going to get sick no more. And I didn't. And it was like, it just kind of like, I think that was like a starting point for me, was just embracing a positive thought, embracing a reality that I wanted instead of what I didn't want. And I wound up like going on to finish all my chemotherapy and seeing everybody getting sicker and sicker and like dying. And I literally was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Like my blood counts were going up. I was gaining weight, and it was like, so I think I just wanted to share that story with some adversity that I've gone through, and then I think that was probably the starting point for me, Bryan, with like this whole thought, the power of thought, So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's a personal story. I think it helps people to put it in perspective, because a lot of times people hear somebody talk and give information on don't say stupid shit in your case, not, so much of, but don't say stupid shit. Well, this guy don't even know my situation. And here, like, just the tip of the iceberg. Just two of Jose's life stories are so compelling, and that he was able to keep himself, focused on still moving his life forward in spite of, everything that was in front of him is, evidence to everything that he's sharing with us. And I, for one, am very thankful to have Jose in my life. I'm very thankful to have him as a friend. Before he says, "Hey, we're like family now. You could call me by my nickname," right? So, and it's true. We haven't over the past year or so had the time to connect as much as I would like. We're both busy building our businesses, but there's some people that you're just connected with, and Jose for me is one of those people. And I hope that everybody. I keep looking over here to the side because I got
Brian.
my iPad. Look, you see my iPad?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at what the people are saying, so powerful. Thank you for sharing your story. Amazing story. Thanks for sharing. Taking something bad and turning it into good. So inspiring. Great message. So inspiring. Thank you for sharing. Power of the mind. And it just goes on and on. Spread positivity. If you want your life to take a leap, the quality of the questions. So true. Same here, but you got to take the leap, have faith. Absolute gold. Thank you so right. So I mean,
Awesome.
I can't read all of these, and even though you can't personally call every single one of these people, I think you would like to. I just know Jose, he'd like to. Everybody, give him a little pep talk. I think you impacted all these people. Plus, I mean, this is freaking lunchtime, for God's sakes. I think by the end of the day that this is gonna, explode because
Awesome.
more and more people are gonna watch it. So thank you very much, Jose. From
Welcome.
the bottom of my heart, not
Pleasure.
just for me, but for all of the Max Challenge members that you've positively impacted.
My pleasure. It really is. And thanks for having me. It's an honor. I mean, I mean, it, I can't even really express how much it means to me to be able to be invited, and it's just a true honor that I could, if I could just be a little piece of someone's life, a part of it's all, part of the puzzle, and in some way. I mean, it's my true passion. It really is. I mean, I can't even tell you, like, my heart. It really is. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to sign off now, everybody. Make sure you do the thumbs up and the hearts and all that. We're looking. And thank you again, Jose.
You're welcome, brother. We'll
All
catch
right.
up.
Yep, for sure. Talk to you soon.
Bye bye, everybody.